This podcast is a quest for well-being, a quest for a meaningful life through the exploration of fundamental truth. Enlightening ideas, insights on physical, mental, and spiritual health. The inspiration is love. The aspiration is to awaken new ways of thinking that can lead us to a new way of being well. Welcome to Body, Mind, and Soul Healing Conversations.
When we are emotionally balanced, our lives have more of a flow and become less of a struggle. As we reduce unhealthy negative emotions and increase the presence of healthy emotions, mindfulness and awareness become more accessible. When our minds are at ease, our problem-solving skills improve and we are better equipped moving towards our goals and aspirations, resulting in happier and more meaningful lives. The seeming impossible becomes possible. There is a shift within our energetic selves, which shift in itself may promote feelings of joy and fulfillment within and in our lives. Valeria Teles interviews Anette Eriksson. She is a clinical therapist in private practice based in New York City, where she provides therapy and coaching to her clients. Anette has a particular interest in helping her clients achieve emotional balance and uses Rational Emotive Behavioral Therapy, REBT, a form of CBT in her practice. REBT is a solution-focused approach and has its roots in ancient Greek, Roman, and Eastern philosophy, with a particular influence of Stoicism. The philosophical component is brought into the cognitive challenging of clients' irrational, unrealistic, and unhelpful thoughts and beliefs, which beliefs tend to create neuroses and dysfunction. The premise of REBT is that our thoughts and beliefs have a lot to do with how we feel and behave. This theory was argued by the Greek Stoic philosopher Epictetus, who notably said, "People are not disturbed by things, but the view they take on them." Anette has a master's degree in clinical social work from Fordham University and postgraduate training in REBT from the Albert Ellis Institute. In addition to her therapeutic education, Anette has an extensive background in training in philosophy and mindfulness. Meet Anette at AnnetteErikssonTherapy.com. Here's the interview with Anette Eriksson.
In your own words, who is Anette Eriksson?
Anette Eriksson is a human being. I'm a spiritual being. I am a gentle person, yet I'm also very strong and resilient. I am a person who loves the wisdom of philosophy and mindfulness. And I am a therapist by profession in New York State.
Yeah, how did you discover that you were a spiritual person?
You know, I think I discovered that early on, but I wasn't sure what that was. Even early on, I remember even at the age of 12, I just had this feeling inside of me. I wasn't sure what it was. And later on, as I discovered yoga and meditation and philosophy, and then I had a name for it.
What is healing to you? It's an open question. And also, what are the obstacles to healing?
Well, healing takes many forms in my view, and different stages and for different people. For me personally, yoga and meditation had a big impact on my healing. And later on, as I've been in therapy myself and healed through therapy myself. and through my schooling, right, to become a therapist and being in school, and that was a lot of healing in that, the reading and learning and working with clients. I find that very healing for me, working with clients, and there are different forms of healings.
What are the obstacles to healing? Why do some of us, I don't know, sometimes I think that they don't heal, but that's like such a off-putting kind of assumption. I believe life doesn't make mistakes.
Right.
Even what we think it's imperfect, it's perfect, right?
Right. I agree with that. And depends on how you define healing. For me, healing is emotional healing, right? I identify that a lot of my healing has been emotional healing. And for me personally, right, and from my experience with clients and so forth, right, there needs to come, one needs to come to a place when you're open to receive that and sort of seek out and be willing, sort of have the openness to receive it. But I think some people find healing in the arts, right, painting or writing, right. So I don't think there's one way. Right. And some people find it in walking in nature and right.
I just went to do a Reiki session. I have somebody next to me, and she said, "You've been giving too much." Because I have been having some pain on my left arm and left neck area. Oh, I'm sorry, right. The right area has been painful. And then she said that symbolizes that I'm giving too much and not open to receive, or even too tired to receive.
Right.
That caught my attention. So I became more curious about receiving. And then you just mentioned now being open to receive. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is a great message for me. Yeah, what is about receiving? How do we learn to open up and receive?
It's an interesting question, right? And I do believe it's maybe different for each person, right? In my experience, speaking from myself and a lot of people who I work with, right? A lot of times it comes when we're sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? Or sick and tired of feeling the pain and the difficulty and sort of giving up a little bit, right? Giving up that. So we fight it for so long. We try to figure it out and we try, right? And finally we get to a point where we can't do it ourselves and we're willing to receive, we ask for help, right? And the help may come from various directions. I've had people almost like guardian angels in my life, right? Who has been helping me along the way, who I've been open for them to help me, and they've been right there at the right time.
So in a way, it's life just doing its job, isn't it? It's very supportive itself, and it's trying to reach that point of us as individuals in the sense of identified with that individual part of life to just kind of open up and become life again and just go back to the stream of life. I love this idea, and it really resonates true to me. And I love how you connect that with healing. So that is very much connected to healing. Being open, receiving, getting too tired. How fascinating. I keep saying that because it is.
Yeah, and it's different for everybody, right? For some people, it may be that they don't reach that bottom, but for them, it's enough to seek help. So we all have our limits, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't have to be that we're sort of on our knees, right? But being willing can happen at any stage. Right?
That's true. I wonder why for some of us, it takes being too tired, reaching that point, right?
Yeah.
So do you think that has to do with some underlying healing work that has not been done?
Speaking of myself and some people, right, that I worked with or familiar with, right, it's, I don't know that I can explain it other than that. I mean, a lot of people come from very difficult backgrounds with whether it's trauma or right? And didn't learn perhaps some coping skills or right ways to live a healthy and fulfilling life. They don't have the tools, and they're used to just fighting, right, for survival almost. And that's how they go about life when they leave that family or whatever that may have been, right? Until you realize that this is not working, right? You can't do it, and you're almost giving up that. And it can become almost like it's either find something different or continue almost like living this almost like a death, living, right? Not really living. So you have to make a choice that you need to try something different. This is not working.
Yeah, it has been certainly my case. Definitely. I see that pattern, this movement that has been always trying to survive emotionally and physically too, of course. It's connected in a way. It has been for me. And then kind of finding the way to, little by little, to break from those chains, I would call it. And then kind of little by little moving. But it has been always like a very small kind of progression. It never reached to the point of where I can say I'm free, completely free from everything. And I wonder if it gets to a point where we are there. Is there freedom when it comes to emotional healing?
I do personally believe that we can have freedom, but it's also, right, it's also very probable that we sort of regress, or right, we fumble and we fall, right, and then we strive to find that freedom again. So right, so I believe that is true for a lot of people, that it's not that it's constant and now we're cured for life. I think it's sort of a continuing process of working towards that.
Somebody said to me, I think last year, there's no cure for life.
Right.
And it seems like we are looking for that, right?
Right. It's unrealistic, right? We're I mean, unfortunate events are bound to happen to all of us, right? It's life, right? But it's how we're dealing with that, right? How we're responding to that, both emotionally, behaviorally, and with that, how we're thinking about that, right? That we can sort of ride the waves, or and the waves are less extreme, or they're going to be very high and low, sort of that emotional imbalance. But I do believe that we all will, right? I mean, a lot of people will stumble and fall sometimes. It's not perfect. Life is not perfect. We're not perfect. We're human beings, and we're bound to make mistakes or fall short, right? And then it's just as important to not beat ourselves up over that, right? Because then we create more emotional balance, to sort of recognize that we're human beings, right? And we all sort of stumble and fall sometimes. It's part of life. But what can we do about that now? It happened, right? How do we move forward or find our balance again?
So you're a therapist, clinical therapist, and coach, and you work with the modality called REBT, Rational Emotive Behavioral Therapy. So talk to me about that, Anette. How does it work, and how did you find out about it?
I am so lucky. I consider myself very lucky to have found this modality, because it's so fitting with who I am and what I've been doing or striving to do all along, right? And I love philosophy. So it's based on philosophy. It was developed by Dr. Albert Ellis in New York in the 1950s. And he based it with the idea that philosophy could be used as therapy, right? And a lot of it is based on Stoic philosophy, right? That it's not what happens, the things that happens to us, but it's how we perceive it, right? And how we're thinking about it. And how we think about it will determine our emotional reaction, whether we have a healthy emotional reaction or an unhealthy emotional reaction. And with that, if we have adoptive behaviors or maladoptive problematic behaviors, right? So what we do in this approach, right, we we set with clients, it's very simple, yet very, I wouldn't say complicated, but there's a lot to it. Right, it's a lot to it. So the simplest way to describe it, I would say, would be it's an A, B, C format, meaning that A is the activating event, whether it's a breakup or you lose your job or whatever that may be. And when people have healthy negative emotions such as feeling sad or disappointed or concerned, they usually don't reach out for help, because then they're able to sort of deal with whatever problem they have on their own. So it's not that we're not striving for perfection or where we don't have any negative emotion. It's those unhealthy negative emotions that create problems in our lives, such as depression, anxiety, shame, guilt, and so forth, unhealthy anger. And when an activating event such as losing a job or a breakup, when that triggers an unhealthy negative emotion, such as depression or anxiety or shame or guilt, that's when we run into problems. And with that, usually it comes with problematic behavior such as isolation, right? Or avoidance or lashing out or whatever it is that we do, right? And we don't function well. So what we do in therapy, we identify the event itself and we talk a little bit about that, but then we've quickly moved to the unhealthy emotion that the person experiences and the problematic behaviors they engage in. And then we'll set either an emotional or behavioral goal with the client, right? How would they like to, what would be a healthier feeling to have, or more adopted behavior to have when the same situation happen, right? So you can't control the situation. And after we do that, we look and see, we help the clients to identify what they're thinking, what they're believing when they're feeling that unhealthy negative emotion. Because in this type of therapy, the idea is, the theory is that what we think, how we believe, has a lot to do with how we feel, right? How we feel and how we behave. So we identify those unhealthy or irrational beliefs tied to the unhealthy negative emotion or behavior, right? And when it's an irrational belief, it's usually a demanding, right? We demand that something should be different or right, it needs to, right, have happened differently, or we have an extreme evaluation about that. So then we start to challenge that, and that's when the philosophical aspect also comes into play. And we start to challenge those irrational beliefs and help the clients develop a more balanced perspective, think differently and believe differently. And that takes a lot of time, a lot of rehearsal to do.
So it goes back to the practice, right? That caught my attention, though, reading about this modality, the aspects that caught my attention. You have outlined them, the article you sent me. So is the mendingness. So that's one that you just mentioned. This is like a rational belief. And then you have global rating. That's another one. So I would love to hear more about the global rating, and then frustration, intolerance. And then the last one is even hard to pronounce. Awfulizing.
Yeah, it's not really a word. I think all the Ellis made it up.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
It's sort of like catastrophizing. So demandingness, it's when we're saying it has to be that way, right? Whether it's about something that has already happened, right? They shouldn't have X, Y, and Z, right? Or I should have. Or about the future, I must be successful or do this. Well, it has to happen, right? But there's no guarantee that it will happen the way we're demanding it to happen. And when we're speaking about the past, there's no way of changing the past. So it's irrational in the way that it's not in line with reality. We can't guarantee a specific outcome. So demanding it's unrealistic, and we can't change the past. So demanding that it should be different than what it is is unrealistic. So what we do a lot of times, we translate what we would like, our desires, our preferences, and we translate that to demands, and that's when we become emotionally unhealthy.
Yeah, it makes sense. A lot of sense.
So that's the demandingness. The global rating is when we can global rating either of ourselves, right? I find that most common. People sort of give themselves a global rating, or another person, or the world, right? That, for example, if somebody makes a mistake, let's suppose at work, and they feel shame, and right, it may sound something like, I'm not good enough, there is something wrong with me, right? So they're sort of rating their whole person based on one experience, and that's illogical, because that was something you did. It was a behavior. It was something that you did. That's not who you are. So we behave in certain ways, right? And we have the ability to change. Behave one way, one day we behave a different way. And so it's not who we are. It's something that we do. And rating our whole being, that's when, and we believe it. We believe there's something wrong with us. We're not good enough. And then you're bound to feel shame or depressed. Or and then frustration intolerance. That's when we tell ourselves, right, that I can't tolerate it, I can't bear it. And when we believe that, we're not going to be able to bear it. We're not going to be able to tolerate it, because that's what we believe, right? And then we're not going to engage in whatever it is, whether it is perhaps, let's suppose, a test coming up. I can't bear failing, so I'm not going to try, right? Or I can't stand, right? Whatever that is, making a mistake. So when we speak that way, then we set ourselves up for anxiety or avoidance, or right, whatever that may be, right? And a lot of times that's not true. We can tolerate it. It's just that it's difficult to tolerate. So it's not that we're not going to perish just because we engage in activity that is difficult, or we're failing, or whatever that may be. It's difficult to tolerate. But then we have to ask, is it worthwhile tolerating it for the possibility of doing what it is that we want to do? Is it worthwhile tolerating? So we make a choice there, right? Is it worthwhile tolerating it? And then if we say yes, right, speak to ourselves different, that it's difficult to tolerate, but I can tolerate it. So that's the frustration intolerance. And the awfulizing, it's when we dramatize situations. And we're not talking here about, because sometimes there are true awful situations, such as somebody passes a loved one, or a medical condition, something truly awful. So it's important to check in with the client, right? If they believe if it's a true awful situation, we don't want to challenge that, right? That would be invalidating. But a lot of times, we tend to awfulize things that are not truly awful, such as, right, a lot of times awfulizing is tied to anxiety. If I don't do a good job, it would be awful. Or if the person doesn't want to go out with me, it would be awful, right? And when we believe that it's the worst thing that could ever happen, we're going to get anxious. So when we put it into perspective, right, that maybe it would be bad if I didn't get this job, if I do an interview, right? But it wouldn't be awful, right? So sometimes it can be helpful to help clients see the difference by sort of ask them, tell me like 3 things that would be truly awful if it happened, right? Something that's truly awful, right? And they may say, well, if my apartment or my house caught fire, burned down, that would be awful, right? Or they would say then, a loved one or myself, a serious medical condition, that is truly awful. So we put that into one category, and then whatever they're talking about, let's say not getting that job, would that fall into that same category? And they would say no. So wouldn't they see that it's not a truly awful situation, but when they believe that and when they tell themselves that, they're going to get anxious. So when they change their thoughts and their belief that it would be bad but not awful, right? The anxiety tends to decrease.
When it comes to balance, it's always We see this extreme way of thinking or ideas about life.
Absolutely.
Right?
Right.
And then sometimes the opposite in the sense of positivity, delusion, I would say, believe in everything. It's great, it's amazing. And then we become too naive. It was my case for a while. And then we become very much distressed when something happens because we're not even thinking about it.
Right.
I love philosophy for the same reason you do, it seems to me, because it brings us to this space of rationality. One of the most beautiful spiritual practices I know of, it's being in the moment, being present to what is present. That brings a lot of clarity and rationality because now we are present to whatever is here. So there's no room to imagine or go anywhere, future or past.
Mm-hmm.
I love this method. I have not actually heard explained the way you do in depth this way. So it's really amazing to me. I love this idea. And the practice of, you call it REBT.
Yes, REBT. Mm-hmm.
There's another aspect of it that I heard, you sent it to me, I was reading about, is the humor, sense of humor.
Right.
Yeah. How do you include that? How is that included?
It is in making fun of the irrational beliefs. We don't make fun of the client's situations. We make fun of their irrational beliefs, sort of like, right? It has to happen. It would be awful, right? Right? So the whatever they're thinking, right? Or the irrationality of their thinking, that's what we make fun of. And clients themselves, when I, for an example, right, I mirror back to them. A lot of it sometimes is role play. So I pretend sometimes I am them, right? And then I speak the way, right? And I exaggerate, and then they start laughing, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's funny. It is funny.
Right?
True.
You see the absurdity of it then when they hear it from me.
It's almost like this reflection, right, Annette? The
Yeah,
mirror.
absolutely.
It is funny when we get to see ourselves, actually.
Yeah.
I agree. There's something else that caught my attention in your bio. You say helping others became more of a calling than a choice, which continues to be true to this day.
Yeah.
So what is the difference between a calling and a choice?
Interesting question. Right? I think it was both for me, but it was the calling I listened to, right? I listened to that. I wasn't, and as I was writing that, I was just writing. Sometimes when I write, I just write whatever comes to me, right? I don't, I just write from my heart sometimes. And so I'm a rational being, but I'm also somebody who listens to my heart. Right?
Yes.
I have both, right? So, but for me, it was that the calling for me is more that step by step. It's almost that I guided or came to this. And when I first went back to school, I didn't think I want to become a therapist. I had people telling me long time ago that they thought that, friends thought I would be good as a therapist, but I just couldn't see myself doing it, right? I needed to heal first, right? I needed to heal before I could take on other people's difficulties. And when I went back to school, I still had a long way to go. So I thought I would be working more behind the scenes, doing administrative and still helping people, but that route, right? So then little by little, as I healed and I got better, it sort of came naturally. Everything just sort of happened, right? And every sort of this just happened, right? And I got an opportunity to work as a therapist part-time. It just sort of landed in my lap, and I took it and loved it, and right. But when I first went back to school, it was really a career change, and that at that time, I felt inside that that's what I'm supposed to do, help people in the way I can help them. I wasn't sure I would be able to do it one-on-one, but work in some sort of organization where the purpose would be to help others.
I love how open you are, because that really says a lot. We talked earlier about being open to receive and to be guided by life. And I believe that. I believe a lot more in the calling than choice, because I don't think there's anyone here really doing anything like, let's say, the center, the individual, the self. So everything to me is life itself as a whole, kind of working through the parts and to do what it does.
Yeah.
I know you have been influenced, or you participate in some of the philosophies and teachings of Shangyan Trungpa Rinpoche. Yeah, I have been in touch with his teachings too. I went to the Shambhala in France too.
Oh, okay.
What an experience. I don't even want to talk about it, but that was incredible. I mean, really eye-opening. I mean, everything opening in that sense. So talk to me for a moment about your spiritual ideas these days.
These days, my spiritual, I mean, it all has come together. My spiritual ideas at this, I mean, I still, I meditate every day. My spiritual, you mentioned, right, with the Naropa Institute, right, you pronounce the name better than I can ever do. Kogam Trungpa, that's what I said. How do you pronounce it?
Not sure. Just came out that way.
So he founded the Naropa Institute in Boulder, Colorado. And part of my education I did there, right? And when I went back for my undergraduate. And that was a life-changing experience for me because I got deeper into the meditation. So it was very healing. And since that time, right, meditation has been a very important part of my life. So that's my still today, right? My spiritual practice is meditation, right? But also the philosophy, right? The philosophy that I read philosophy. I love reading philosophy. And it's also some of it is very spiritual. And it all really is the same message, really, about finding that goodness inside, right? Being gentle, right? Being compassionate with others, being kind, being of service, being present. Right? It's the same message, wherever you look, all of that, the different philosophies and with meditation and mindfulness.
Yes, so true, Annette. When you say the same, it might be because they come from these authentic experiences of individuals that they have kind of merged themselves into practices that would lead them into these insights, kind of profound insights.
It's like a natural, right? I remember when I was in Boulder, Colorado at the Naropa Institute and did a lot of meditation, right? It was almost like a transformation, right? A transformation that just happened organically, right? As far as, after that, I started to reach out to people and make right where I had done wrong. It was just sort of like a natural, not because I was asked to. It was just a change within me, and sort of like the Shambhala is built on a lot of that believing that everybody, right, have that goodness inside, and we can reach an enlightened society. That's what. Right, by finding that goodness inside each one of us.
So actually about your work, how do new clients meet you if they want to talk to you, to hire you? What's the best way to do that?
The best way would be to go to my website. So that's Anette Eriksson therapy.com.
That's great to know. I wanted to ask you the question before. I have so many questions. Oh, the open questions. I had way too many that I didn't ask. So love, what is your understanding and idea of love? What is love to you?
What is love to me? Love, can they give different forms too, but finding love, self-love, right? Finding love inside of oneself and finding love in the connection with other people, right? Being kind and being compassionate and being forgiving, right? Forgiveness, that's love, right? And really love to me is also the absence of those unhealthy negative emotions such as anger and right? Because then you detach from love. When you're depressed, you're anxious, you're angry and so forth, you can't feel the love, so you detach from love. So love is also detachment from that and being able to experience love inside and also give and receive out, right, with others.
Yes, 1 billion times. to all of it. So true. And what do you think, or actually, what do you feel is the purpose of the human experience?
Oh, wow. The purpose of the human experience, maybe, speaking for myself and the way I look at it, right? The purpose is to grow, to learn. I do believe, and I don't know if it's true for everyone, but for me, I do believe in the spiritual aspect of living, right? And with that, right? Love and striving to do better and become a better person, both to ourselves and others.
How do you define true power? Or what is power to you?
Oh, power. For me, my experience, true power, well, there are different ways, but true power comes from inside. That source of power within, almost you can't really define it, right? But for me, I find power through reaching inside in meditations. But I also found a lot of power by taking responsibility for myself, my actions, my thoughts, my feelings. That's very empowering to me when I look at myself instead of pointing the fingers at others. That's very empowering, and to know that I have the power, or I have the, to change.
And the last question is, what 3 experiences you wish everyone to have before they lose the body, before they die?
Oh, I would say some sort of spiritual experience, right? I think that's beautiful, right? That's beautiful. And to feel love, right? Be loved, right? It all goes together, right? And to find happiness, to find joy in life, right? Maybe not all the time, but to have that in your life, whatever that means to you.
Yes, 1 trillion times to all of it. And I hear this over and over, the be loved, love and be loved. Everyone pretty much says that. That's how important it is, isn't it, for all of us to feel valued, accepted, respected. And I wonder if that's the same thing, Anette, being valued and respected and being loved. Do you correlate those 2 feelings?
I'm not sure. So I believe, right, one, it's important to be careful to not depend on other people's validation as far as believing or feeling loved, right? That we are loved, or we can feel that love independently of other people's approval or disapproval. I think that's very important. But absolutely, I mean, we need each other. I mean, we're human beings, we're social beings. We like, right? So that's an important part of it, right? To find people who value us and we value them, and we find that human connection. That's very important.
Yeah, that's a very good point. True, about not depending on the validation of others to feel loved. Yes. Thank you so much again for your presence here today, for everything you do, the way you do it. I love the way you express yourself. You communicate the message. It's just beautiful. It just flows like music. Thank you so much for being open to life.
I appreciate being here.
We'll talk soon. Take good care, Anette, of yourself.
Thank you. You do too.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. To learn more about Anette Eriksson and her work, please visit AnetteErikssonTherapy.com.
To learn more about this podcast, please visit fitforjoy.org/podcast. Thank you again for listening, and bye for now.